Okay, so good morning, everybody. We are about to start the first chapter of the second book of Tanya. The second book of Tanya is 12 chapters long, and some of the chapters are actually not very lengthy, although they do deal with very profound subject matter. Um, as we as we said last week we started off with an introduction that the Alter Rebbe writes. This first chapter is not a continuation of the introduction. The introduction was basically for us to understand why we are learning the second book of Tanya, which originally the Alter Rebbe had actually wanted to put first, because it is actually a foundation for our Avodah. It enables us to have what we call pure faith, because as we explained last week, and whoever missed it, the recording is up. As we explained, the only way to have pure faith is when it is not mixed together with intellectual rationalization. So how do we get to the point of having pure faith? By understanding all there is to understand, by using our intellectual capacity, by using our capabilities, every person according to his or her level, to understand what there is to understand about godliness, and the rest is faith. But then it becomes what we call pure faith, because it's not mixed in with any form of rationalization. So this second book of Tanya, Shaar, Hayichud ve'emunah, which is translated as the gate of unity and faith, we are going to get to the level of having pure faith by understanding what unity of God means. Unity of God does not mean that there is one Hashem. Unity of God means that Hashem is everywhere and everything. And this book of Tanya is going to delve into the different types of unity of Hashem, which sounds strange, because if Hashem is everywhere and everything, then and unity means one. So why are there two different types of unity? But there is unity of Hashem from Hashem's perspective, and there's unity of Hashem from our perspective. And that's what the Tanya refers to as higher level unity, Yichud Ilah, and Yichud Tata, and lower level unity of Hashem. But we are going to get into that in the next few chapters of Shaar Hayichud ve'emunah. Interestingly enough, the first book of Tanya is based on the pasuk, which we have learned already, based on the pasuk Ki karev elecha hadover ma'od, that this is very, very close to you. And the Alter Rebbe, relevant to Avodas Hashem, is relevant, to develop a love and fear of Hashem is relevant. And the Alter Rebbe starts off that book of Tanya saying, we are going to learn and understand very well how this is so. That is the goal. Whereas for this book of Tanya, for the second book of Tanya, the goal is to understand a little bit. Achdus Hashem, the unity of Hashem, has to do with a seeming contradiction of creation. In other words, how can Hashem be one when the world exists? We see around us the world. We don't see Hashem. So that is the entire question. How can Hashem be one? How can Hashem be everything when what we see around us does not appear to be Hashem? So in the last book of the Torah, in Sefer Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu, our leader, spoke to the nation, and he said, one of the things that he said to them was, V'yodata hayom, you should know today, Vashivoisa el levavecha, take to heart, and this expression is important, take to heart. It's not enough just to be told, and not enough just to know, but take deeply onto your hearts, Ki Hashem hu ha'elikim, that Hashem is our God, Bashamayim, Mimal, in the heavens above, Ve'al ha'aretz mitachas, and on the earth below, Ein oid. There is nothing else besides Hashem. Now, what's interesting is, let's say a person had no prior knowledge of godliness. He was an ignorant person in a very remote part of the land. Why would it occur to him that there's a God underneath the earth? That we have to take to heart that it is not so. In other words, we know the older cultures and older nations of the world assign different gods, so to speak, the god of the heavens and the gods of the earth and the god of the sun and the moon and the stars, etc., 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 right? It was our forefather Avraham Avinu that knew and proclaimed that there is one God. So usually a person wouldn't really think about the fact that there is a God underneath the earth or on the earth, right? Wouldn't it be enough just to be told? So why do we have to be taking this to heart? And the next chapters in Tanya are going to explain this thoroughly. To begin this explanation, the Alter Rebbe brings a verse in Tehillim, chapter 119, Kuf Yotes, that La'olam Hashem Devarcha Nitzav Bashamayim. Your word, Hashem, stands firmly in the heavens at all times. Now, what does this mean? It sounds like poetic, right? Your word stands in the heavens firmly at all times. It's a little like poetry, right? But in actual fact, we know that Hashem created the world with 10 utterances, 10 statements, Asara Mamoris. And let's talk about the heavens, because this is the example that the Alter Rebbe brings. So when Hashem created the heavens, what did Hashem say? Hashem said, Yehi Rakia B'soy Chamayim. There was this whole mishmash of a world, and Hashem said, let there be a firmament, let there be a heaven amongst the waters, because everything was mixed, right? Hashem had to separate the waters. That was how Hashem created the world. And these words that Hashem used to create the heavens, they stand forever in the heavens and are forever enclosed in the heavens, giving them life and existence always. And this is in alignment with what it says in the prophet Yeshayahu, Udvar Elokeinu Yakum La'olam, that the word of our God exists forever. Now, the explanation to all this, the Alter Rebbe says, comes from the Baal Shem Tov. It happens to be that it is actually from a medrash, which the Baal Shem Tov lived with the words of this medrash, of this commentary. He actually created a way of life around it. Up till that point, people may have thought that Hashem created the world, and Hashem may have created the world with 10 utterances, as we see in the Torah. But then, Hashem created the world and left it to its own devices, like left the operating system in place, but was just supervising from a distance, let's say, right? Operating system, excellent operating system, no glitches. Hashem created nature that, when it gets watered, it grows, and Hashem sort of took a vacation on the side. But we know from the explanations of the Baal Shem Tov based on the Medrash that the words are always in the heaven. The words of Hashem are always in the heavens, creating and constantly causing the heavens to exist. Hashem didn't simply create the heavens and go take a vacation. Didn't leave the world alone. And if these words that Hashem spoke and the letters which are in the words would return to their source, the heavens would be as non-existent as they were prior to creation. They would not exist. In other words, it's not just, we're going to explain the next few chapters more in detail. It's not just that Hashem created the world and then left. Hashem maintains this creation constantly. Hashem is constantly creating the worlds, and the words of Hashem and the letters of Hashem are constantly giving energy to the creation. Now, the Alter Rebbe brings the example of the heavens, but the question is, does this apply to all of creation? And the answer is yes, it does. The reason that the Alter Rebbe starts off with the heavens is because the heavens are known, as a lofty place, right? Even when we say, oh, God, our Father in heaven. Well, Hashem is everywhere. He's not just in heaven, but we use the expression heaven to symbolize like a lofty spiritual plane. And not only that, it's lofty spiritually, but it's also lofty physically. The heavens are above us. So therefore, This example is brought to imply that if they need the word of Hashem to exist, anything lower also does. Everything in creation exists because of the word of Hashem constantly giving it life force and energy. And the Alter Rebbe continues to say, and this is really like very interesting, that even inanimate objects, which don't seem to be dependent on any life-giving force, right? A stone, grass, plants, trees, animals, you could understand that Hashem is giving them energy to live and to grow because you see the growth, you see the vitality. But a stone, an inanimate stone or any other object, doesn't seem to be dependent on any life force. So you couldn't make the mistake that Hashem created it and it just, and went away and there it is, right? Similar to, let's say, a person or animal or even plant, which has two components, has a physical component and a spiritual component. The physical component of a person is his body, right? When he is alive, Hashem is keeping a person alive. When a person passes, the body still exists. Even though Hashem has taken away the life force, the body still exists, has now become inanimate, right? But the body still exists, and Hashem is maintaining that body, the existence of that body. So when we see a stone or any other inanimate object, we could mistakenly think that there's no life in that, and Hashem is not really contributing anymore. However, the Alter Rebbe says that even inanimate objects, which don't seem to be which don't seem to be dependent on any life-giving force, do depend on the words of Hashem to exist. Now, how does this actually work? Because when we read the 10 utterances in the Torah about when Hashem created the world, we don't actually see an itemized list of every single creation that exists, right? So how can we say that the words and the letters of Hashem give existence to everything? Maybe it's just those things that are written in the Torah. So the Holy Arizal, who was a famous Kabbalist, he explains that every object, every creation has a nefesh, has a kind of a soul, even inanimate objects, enabling them to exist, yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. And in the coming chapters, we're going to understand how that is different from what a human being creates, right? Hashem created the world from nothing. So the stone didn't just exist coincidentally because there was a waterfall which dropped part of the mountain. And no, the stone exists because Hashem created it from nothing. And therefore, in order for the stone to maintain its existence, it needs the life force that Hashem gives it. And this life force that comes from Hashem is actually derived from the original 10 utterances that are in the Torah. So, but as we said, not all creations are itemized. There's no itemized list in the Torah that Hashem said anything to create them, right? So therefore, some objects may not come directly from the 10 utterances. Their life force does not come directly from what is written in the Torah at the time of creation of the world, but from different combinations and permutations of the letters, which the Alter Rebbe actually says there are 231 ways in which the letters of the 10 statements with which Hashem created the world can be arranged. So, for example, the word stone in Hebrew is even, a stone, right? We don't see that Hashem created a stone in the Torah, but that name, even, right? Why are some creations explicit in the Torah and others not, and only are derived from different combinations and permutations? Because certain creations, for example, the stone, is not able to tolerate the direct energy from the statements with which Hashem created the world as we see them in the Torah. So the godly energy which creates the world, had to be reduced through the exchange of letters, all these 231 combinations, even through the lowest level, which we are actually familiar with. The lowest level of creation is called gematria. Gematria is when we say that something, each letter in the Hebrew alphabet has a numerical value and is equal to something else. And Hashem used gematria to give life force to some creations. The Alter Rebbe doesn't specify which ones over here, but gematria is the lowest form of derivation from these 10 utterances, because gematria is not even letters. It's just a numerical equivalent to the letters. And what happens is that for every single creation that exists, the life and the light of Hashem becomes reduced and exchanged. One letter becomes exchanged for another letter according to different formulas, until the light of Hashem can enclose itself and give existence to that creation. The name of the object, like we called the stone an even, is that reduction. We don't know the actual formula of how Hashem got to that reduction or that calculation. Maybe very great Kabbalists do know, but what we do know is that the name of something is the life force and the creation of that object, which is, by the way, very important that, our Jewish names are also our life force and creation. And that is how we conclude, and that is how the Alter Rebbe concludes this chapter, that everything comes from Hashem. In this chapter, which point are we emphasizing? That everything gets its life force and energy from Hashem, from the 10 utterances with which Hashem created the world. And in the next chapters, we're going to go much deeper. In specifically the next chapter, we're going to explain in a much deeper level how Hashem is constantly creating the world. Then the chapters are going to take us on a nice journey through Tzimtzum and how this actually, does the world exist? Does the world not exist? So be prepared for a mind-boggling journey. Yes, hi, Sarah.
Okay. I remember when I was becoming from that someone said that how everything exists because Hashem is constantly thinking of it. And he was saying that like even a table like only exists because Hashem. So then when you said there's like 231 things, look, I was thinking you were going to make such a bigger number because
No, so
how,
let me clarify that. There's not
yeah.
231 creations. There are 231 formulas of how to exchange the original letters in the
Oh,
10
okay.
utterances. Now, from those 231 calculations, permutations, formulas, whatever you want to call them, come innumerous creations.
Okay. Thank you.
And we don't necessarily need to know what they are. And it's just enough for us to know that everything is created by Hashem's words, and that Hashem's words is what is maintaining creation at all times. Otherwise, creation would cease to exist. Anyone else? Okay, so some of these chapters are short. I'm going to end the recording.